Imagine waking up on the morning of your sister's wedding, only to discover that your parents secretly cut off your hair while you slept. Not because of a mistake, not to help you, but because they didn't want you to look prettier than your sister on her big day. Now imagine standing in front of a room full of guests, humiliated, betrayed, and realizing your own family orchestrated it. What would you do if the very people meant to love and protect you tried to erase you instead? This isn't just a story about revenge, it's about reclaiming power after years of being silenced, manipulated, and made small. It's about what happens when the scapegoat finally fights back. In today's video, you'll hear Caitlin's unforgettable journey from being publicly humiliated by her own family to turning the tables in a way they never saw coming. Her story is raw, emotional, and ultimately empowering. And if you've ever felt like the outsider in your own home or had to rebuild after betrayal, this might be the most validating 20 minutes of your day. So stick around, because what started with scissors and shame ended with freedom and fire. If you've ever been through something similar, I'd love to hear your story in the comments. And if this kind of powerful, real-life drama speaks to you, don't forget to like the video and subscribe for more stories that hit where it hurts and heal where it matters. Her name is Caitlin, and for most of her life, she played the role of the good daughter. Quiet, polite, always stepping aside so her younger sister Emma could shine. Caitlin never wanted to compete, just wanted peace. But in her family, peace came at a cost: her self-worth, her voice, and eventually, her dignity. The cracks had always been there. Emma was the golden child, loud, confident, and endlessly praised. Caitlin, meanwhile, was the one who got backhanded compliments. "You're pretty, but Emma has that spark." Or worse, silence when she did something worth celebrating. Her parents especially, her mother, seemed to believe that Caitlin's role was to support Emma, not to outshine her. And Caitlin accepted it. For years, she swallowed the bitterness, telling herself that this was just how families worked. Then came Emma's wedding, the event that would expose everything. Caitlin was asked to be a bridesmaid, of course. Not the maid of honor. Emma gave that to a college friend. But Caitlin showed up, smiling, supportive. She paid for the expensive dress, helped with planning, and let herself be talked into hosting a pre-wedding brunch. On the surface, everything looked perfect. Underneath, she felt the tension building. It wasn't until the night before the wedding that everything changed. Caitlin went to bed after a long day of rehearsals and preparations. She was tired but content. Her hair, which she'd grown out for years into long, soft waves, had been professionally styled that afternoon. She felt beautiful, elegant, even. And maybe, for once, she believed she could just enjoy being part of her sister's big day without drama. But when she woke up the next morning and looked in the mirror, everything stopped. Chunks of her hair were missing, uneven, ragged, as if someone had taken scissors to it in the dark. Her pillow was covered in strands. At first, she thought she was having a nightmare. But then the realization hit: this wasn't an accident. Someone had cut her hair while she slept. Panic turned to disbelief, then fury. She stormed out of her room to confront her parents. Her mother barely looked surprised. Her father avoided eye contact. And Emma? She laughed. "You are getting too much attention," she said with a shrug. "It's my wedding. You'll still look fine if you just put it up." That moment shattered something inside Caitlin. This wasn't just about hair. It wasn't just about a wedding. This was about every time she had been pushed aside, silenced, diminished so Emma could have the spotlight. And now they had crossed a line that couldn't be undone. They had physically violated her body, her identity, in her sleep. But instead of screaming, Caitlin went silent. Something shifted. She didn't cry. She didn't beg. She looked each of them in the eye, nodded slowly, and said, "Okay, I understand." That was the moment her revenge began. Because Caitlin realized something important. They thought she was weak. They thought she'd take it, like always. But what they didn't realize is that they had just created a version of her with nothing left to lose, and that version was done being quiet. The wedding went on. Caitlyn showed up, hair pinned back, makeup done, calm and composed. On the outside, she looked like the supportive sister. On the inside, she was watching, listening, planning. She borrowed a phone from another bridesmaid under the pretense of taking pictures. She recorded conversations. Not just chatter about the ceremony, but actual proof of Emma and her parents laughing about what they'd done to her. She downloaded photos. She noted Emma's social media login left open on a shared device. And later that night, instead of going home, Caitlyn booked herself into a quiet hotel room and started laying the foundation for something bigger. She wasn't going to ruin the wedding with a public scene. That would only make her look bitter. No, Caitlyn wanted consequences. Real ones. That came slowly, quietly, and hit where it hurt. And it started with a few small clicks. This was no longer just about getting even. It was about taking back her voice, taking back her power, and showing her family, especially Emma, that the girl they thought they had broken was about to rebuild herself into someone they couldn't touch. Because when you've spent your whole life being told to stay small, sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is finally decide to take up space. And Caitlyn was ready. That night, alone in her hotel room, Caitlyn set her plan into motion. No rage, no chaos, just calm, careful action. She began by crafting fake travel confirmations nearly identical to the real ones, but with a key difference. The departure time was altered just enough to cause maximum confusion. She had these fake tickets printed at the hotel's business center, then delivered to the bridal suite as a gift from the wedding party. It was subtle, elegant. Just the beginning. Then came the social media. With Emma's login still accessible from a shared device earlier that day, Caitlyn scheduled several posts to go live over the next week in flattering angles, awkward captions, and just the right amount of fake humility to sound like Emma's voice. One caption read, "Feeling like literally the most beautiful bride in history. Sorry to all other brides who could never." It was the kind of thing that made people raise eyebrows, then quietly screenshot. But Caitlyn wasn't done. She sent an anonymous email to Emma's workplace, raising gentle concerns about discrepancies in her resume. Attached were records from her college, showing a lower GPA and a different graduation year than she had claimed. The message wasn't aggressive, just curious, concerned, and enough to spark an internal review. And then, finally, the recordings. She had pieced together snippets from the wedding day, her mother and Emma casually joking about the haircut, even laughing. Caitlyn didn't send it anywhere. Not yet. But she kept it. A safety net. A reminder that if they tried to twist the narrative, she had the truth, ready to go. The next few days unfolded like clockwork. At 2:37 a.m., Caitlyn's burner email pinged with a security alert from the hidden camera she had discreetly synced to the bridal suite. She opened the footage and watched as Emma stumbled out of bed, frantically scratching her arms. "It burns," she cried. Jackson looked confused, then started scratching too. They tore off the bedding, inspected the sheets, even called hotel management in the middle of the night. Caitlyn had sprinkled itching powder into the lingerie and certain spots on the bed, not enough to cause serious harm, just enough to ruin the wedding night they thought would be perfect. The next morning, the chaos escalated. Caitlyn monitored the bridesmaid group chat from the borrowed account. At 8:43 a.m., Emma's text came through in full panic. "Our tickets are wrong. Airport says 1:00 p.m., but the confirmation says 10:00. I'm freaking out. They missed their original flight. Their luggage, already checked in, flew ahead and sat unattended in Bali for hours." That same day, the first of Caitlyn's scheduled Instagram posts went live. A zoomed-in photo showing Emma's double chin mid-laugh, with a caption that read, "This is what pure joy looks like. Sorry not sorry for being flawless." It stayed up for hours before Emma realized and took it down. But the damage was done. Her followers were confused. Some laughed, some were concerned. Others sent messages asking if she was okay. And meanwhile, Caitlin watched. Quiet, unseen. But the ripples kept spreading. Back home, people started whispering. The hairstylist from the wedding, horrified by what had happened to Caitlin, told a few people the truth. That truth traveled fast. Cousins texted Caitlin in shock. Friends messaged her with concern. Her aunt sent a tentative, "Are you okay?" message. Caitlin didn't confirm anything. She didn't deny it either. She let the silence speak. 3 days into the honeymoon, Emma was still dealing with mysterious rashes. Caitlin could barely contain her grim satisfaction reading the frantic group chat updates. Emergency pharmacy visits. Cancelled excursions. All while Emma struggled to maintain the illusion of a perfect romantic getaway. The Instagram pictures she did post were strained, overfiltered, and increasingly desperate. Then came the call from Mark. He wasn't part of the plan, just one of the groomsmen. But he had noticed things: Caitlin's quiet strength, the change in her demeanor, the way she had handled everything with calm dignity. "I don't know what you did," he said over the phone, but Jackson called his parents freaking out. "Emma's losing it. Something about her job calling too?" Caitlin simply replied, "Honeymoons can be unpredictable." There was a pause. Then Mark asked, "Would you want to grab coffee when I'm back in town?" No wedding talk, just you and me. It caught her off guard. But she said yes. 10 days into the honeymoon, Caitlin's parents started calling. Voicemails piled up. Her father's voice was tense. "We need to talk about these rumors." Her mother was sweeter but fake, as always. "Let's show a united front. Family is everything." Caitlin didn't respond. Not to them. Instead, she focused on herself. She moved into a new apartment using savings she'd been building for years. She took a week off work. She started entertaining a job offer from another city, far away from the toxic shadow of her family. And when Emma and Jackson finally returned, they weren't the happy newlyweds they had expected to be. They were tired, frustrated, still itchy. Emma's social image was shaky, her job on edge, and her trust in the world rattled. To their friends, it all looked like bad luck. A series of unfortunate events. But Emma knew. Even if she couldn't prove it. She told a cousin in a whisper, "It's like someone deliberately sabotaged everything." But Caitlin had been meticulous. Nothing pointed directly to her. The itching powder? Could have been detergent. The ticket confusion. Booking error. The email to work? Anonymous. The social media? Maybe a glitch. Maybe a hack. Or maybe Emma was just unraveling. And Caitlin? She was just getting started. A month passed. Caitlin agreed to meet her parents in a neutral location, a busy coffee shop downtown where they couldn't raise their voices or play the victim. She walked in, calm and composed. They looked worn down. Her mother's eyes were tired, and her father's confident posture had deflated. They started the conversation immediately, skipping any warmth or apology. "We need to clear the air," her father said. "The rumors about what happened to your hair, they're hurting our reputation." Caitlin tilted her head slightly. "What rumors?" "That we cut your hair while you were sleeping," he said, clearly uncomfortable. "To make sure you didn't outshine Emma." "That's not a rumor," she replied calmly. "That's exactly what happened." Her mother jumped in. "It wasn't like that. We were trying to help you. You've always relied too much on your looks, we thought." "Save it," Caitlin interrupted, her voice steady. "I'm not here for excuses. I'm here to let you know I'm moving to Seattle. I've accepted a new job. And I won't be joining family events anymore." "You can't just cut us off," her father said, his voice rising just slightly. "We're your parents." Caitlin stood up. "Watch me." Then she leaned in and added quietly, "By the way, I have recordings of you admitting what you did." If you ever try to twist the story or contact me again, those recordings will find their way to everyone you care about." Her mother's face paled. "You wouldn't." "Try me," Caitlin said simply. "You created this version of me the day you decided to violate my body in my sleep. Live with the consequences." She walked away from that cafe with her shoulders high, her breath steady, and a sense of freedom she hadn't felt in years. For the first time in her life, she had drawn a line and meant it. Later that week, Emma sent a single message. "I know it was you. I can't prove it, but I know." Caitlin never replied. Instead, she threw herself into her new job in Seattle. Her office had large windows overlooking the city skyline. Her apartment was cozy, filled with soft light, plants, and peace. Most mornings, she sat on her small balcony with a cup of coffee, watching the ferries glide across the water, wondering how she had ever survived in that old life of constant tension and conditional love. Mark, true to his word, stayed in touch. Their coffee turned into lunch, then dinner, then late-night phone calls. He didn't rush her or push her to talk about what happened unless she wanted to. He made her laugh. He listened. And he reminded her, without saying it outright, that love didn't have to come with manipulation or control. "I knew you were different," he told her one night, "the moment you stood there at that wedding looking like a queen, even after what they did to you. Anyone else would have crumbled. But you stood taller." They started dating officially soon after. 4 months into her new job, Caitlin received a promotion. Mark brought over champagne and made dinner from scratch. As they toasted, he looked at her and said, "You turned pain into power. That's not just strength, it's grace." It was the first time in her life someone had admired her for the very traits her family had always tried to dim. Her hair had grown into a sharp, elegant bob, a style she had never dared to try before. Ironically, the thing meant to shame her had pushed her into discovering a look that actually suited her far better. She felt confident, fresh, like herself, but finally unfiltered. Caitlin kept limited contact with a few extended family members, those who had reached out with genuine concern. Her cousin Rachel came to visit one weekend. Over a long dinner, they talked honestly for the first time in years. "I always thought your parents were hard on you," Rachel admitted. "But I never said anything. I guess I thought they must know better." "That's how it works," Caitlin replied. "People stay silent because they don't want to believe it's really happening. And then the damage continues." She had started therapy. At first, it was just to unpack the wedding. But soon, it became much deeper. Years of subtle comments, favoritism, comparisons, and manipulation came to the surface. Her therapist helped her name the patterns, helped her understand that being hurt wasn't her fault. "They weaponized your beauty," her therapist said once. "They taught you it was the only thing you had to offer and then punished you for it." That moment hit hard. It explained so much. Caitlin began to build a healthier relationship with her appearance. She no longer dressed to hide or to compete. She dressed for herself. She liked feeling put together, but it wasn't her shield anymore. It was just one part of who she was. Through an online forum for people healing from toxic family relationships, Caitlin connected with others who shared similar experiences. The stories were eerily familiar: people betrayed by those who were supposed to love them. People gaslit, ignored, or used. She started a small support group in Seattle. They met once a month. No pressure, no expectations, just space to be honest, raw, and real. "You turned your pain into purpose," Mark said after one of her meetings. "That's the difference between revenge and healing." And he was right. Caitlin had taken back her power, not just through calculated acts of revenge, but by rebuilding her life. By refusing to play small anymore. By surrounding herself with people who saw her clearly and loved her anyway. Emma occasionally sent texts, some angry, some guilt-tripping, some pretending everything could go back to normal. Caitlin responded to none of them. Her mother sent a Christmas card with a salon gift certificate. Her father left voicemail after voicemail. Not one of them ever said the words she needed to hear. I was wrong. I'm sorry. I hurt you. But then, almost a year after the wedding, her mother sent a long email. For the first time, it felt different. I've been seeing a counselor, she wrote. She's helping me understand that what we did to you was wrong. I thought I was protecting Emma's day. But I see now that I was stealing something from you that I had no right to take. I don't expect forgiveness, but I want you to know I see the harm. Caitlin read the email 3 times, looking for the trap, waiting for the manipulation. But it wasn't there. She replied simply, "Thank you for acknowledging the harm. It's a first step." That was all she could offer. No promises, no opening of doors, just a crack of light. Her father never changed. Emma still believed she had been the real victim. But Caitlin? She had moved on. She had friends who lifted her up. A partner who celebrated her, not competed with her. A community that saw her not as too much, but just enough. 18 months after the wedding that changed everything, Mark proposed. It was a rainy evening, and he knelt on the balcony with a ring that had belonged to his grandmother. "I want to spend my life with someone who knows how to survive heartbreak and still choose love," he said. "You taught me that." Caitlin said yes. Their wedding was small, peaceful, full of people who loved them for who they truly were. Her parents weren't invited. Neither was Emma. Not out of vengeance, but out of self-protection. Family, Caitlin told Mark as they finalized the guest list, is who treats you like family. The night before her wedding, she looked in the mirror and touched her hair, now shoulder length, soft and full of life. She barely recognized the version of herself who had once been afraid to shine. In her place stood someone free, whole, unapologetic, and finally, at peace. The morning of Caitlin and Mark's wedding arrived quietly, without chaos or drama. The sky was soft gray, a gentle mist hanging in the air, the kind of weather Caitlin used to find gloomy, but today, it felt like a clean slate. She got ready in a small lakeside cottage surrounded by friends who loved her simply for being herself. There were no demands, no comparisons. Just laughter, calm energy, and the hum of music in the background. As her hairstylist clipped the final pins into her soft waves, Caitlin looked at her reflection and smiled. Her dress wasn't about impressing anyone, it was about how she felt in it. Powerful, peaceful, beautiful, on her own terms. When she stepped outside and walked down the stone path toward the ceremony, she saw Mark waiting by the water's edge. He looked up and smiled in that quiet, steady way he always had. The guests, just a small circle of chosen family, stood and turned, but all Caitlin could focus on was Mark's eyes. She wasn't walking toward a fairy tale. She was walking into a life they had built together, day by day, from the ground up. The ceremony was short but deeply personal. They exchanged vows they had written themselves, words full of truth rather than fluff. Mark spoke of courage. Caitlin spoke of healing. And when they kissed, it wasn't a perfect movie moment, it was better. It was real. After the ceremony, there was no huge reception. Just dinner under a white canopy, fairy lights glowing in the dusk, and heartfelt toasts. Rachel gave one that made everyone tear up. "To Caitlin," she said, raising her glass. "Who taught us that family isn't who you're born to, but who shows up for you when it matters most?" Later that night, Caitlin and Mark snuck away from the crowd to sit by the lake in silence. She kicked off her shoes and dipped her toes into the cool water. Mark leaned into her shoulder. "Do you ever think about it?" he asked gently. "That day?" She didn't need to ask which day he meant. The wedding. The wedding. "Sometimes," she said, "but not like I used to. It's not pain anymore. It's just distance." He nodded. "You've come so far." She smiled softly. "I had to." It struck her then how much she had changed. Not just on the outside, though her reflections certainly looked different, but inside, the girl who once begged for her parents' approval was gone. In her place was a woman who had learned to define her own worth. Over the next few months, Caitlin settled deeper into her life. The support group she started continued to grow. New members came every month with their own version of betrayal, grief, and healing. She never gave advice. She just listened. And in doing so, helped others find their own voice, just like she had found hers. One evening, after a particularly emotional group session, a young woman stayed behind. "How did you forgive them?" she asked quietly. Caitlin thought for a long moment before answering. "I didn't," she said. "At least, not all the way. Forgiveness isn't a door you walk through. It's more like a window you sometimes open and sometimes close, depending on the weather." The girl smiled, and Caitlin smiled back. That was the heart of it. Her healing wasn't perfect. It wasn't linear. Some days, the old hurt would sneak up on her. A smell, a photo, a phrase could pull her back. But she had tools now. A life now. People now. One afternoon, about a year after her wedding, Caitlin received a letter in the mail. It had no return address, but she recognized the handwriting instantly. Her mother. She hesitated before opening it, then sat down on the couch with a steady breath. The letter wasn't long. It simply said, "I think about you every day. I still don't know how to fix what I broke. I only know I want to. I hope one day you'll let me try." There was no pressure, no guilt, just uncertainty, vulnerability. For the first time, it felt like a real beginning. Caitlin didn't respond right away. She let the letter sit on her desk for weeks. Every time she looked at it, she felt something new: anger, sadness, nostalgia, and sometimes the faintest flicker of hope. Eventually, she wrote back, "I'm not ready to rebuild, but I'm glad you're starting to understand the damage. That's something." It wasn't an open door, but it wasn't locked either. Mark supported her through it all. No judgment, no advice, just presence. "You're allowed to protect your peace," he reminded her, "even from the people who say they've changed." Caitlin nodded. "I know, and I will." As the seasons shifted from summer to fall, she found herself more grounded than ever. She cooked more. She read more. She walked the city with purpose. She laughed. She loved. One day, while walking home from work, she saw a mother and daughter arguing outside a cafe. The girl looked about 17, frustrated, wounded, trying to explain herself while the mother dismissed her with a wave of the hand. Caitlin paused, watched for a moment, then kept walking. She couldn't save everyone, but she had saved herself. And maybe, just maybe, her story would help someone else do the same. At home, she curled up next to Mark with a cup of tea and opened her laptop to write a new post for her support group blog. Sometimes, the people who hurt you the most are the ones who taught you how strong you really are. You don't owe them a seat at your table, but you do owe yourself a life free from their control. She hit publish, then leaned back, letting the warmth of her new life sink in. And for the first time in a long time, she didn't feel like she was surviving. She felt like she was living. A few months later, Caitlin found herself sitting in a cozy Seattle bookstore, waiting to speak at a small event organized by her support group. It wasn't anything fancy, just folding chairs, warm lighting, and about 20 people who understood what it meant to survive toxic family dynamics. The theme that evening was reclaiming your voice. Caitlin wasn't sure she had anything profound to say, but when her name was called, she stood up, took a deep breath, and began. "I used to believe that love meant loyalty no matter the cost. That being family meant accepting hurt without question. That speaking up would make me selfish. But I've learned that none of that is true. Protecting your peace isn't selfish, it's survival, and choosing yourself is strength." The room was silent. Not awkward, just still. Like everyone was holding a breath they hadn't realized they needed to let go of. When she sat back down, someone squeezed her hand. It was a new member, barely 20, who had shared earlier that her father still called her too dramatic for crying during arguments. After the event, Caitlin stayed back to help clean up. Folding chairs, empty coffee cups, leftover cookies. As she stacked the last tray, the event organizer handed her a small card. "Someone left this for you," she said with a curious smile. Caitlin opened it slowly. Inside, written in simple handwriting, were the words, "Thank you, you gave me the courage to walk away." She didn't know who had written it. But it didn't matter. It was enough. That night, walking home through the quiet streets, Caitlin thought about how different her life had become. The woman she used to be, the one who stayed quiet, who smiled through pain, who let others control the narrative, felt like a ghost she'd finally laid to rest. In her place stood someone real. Someone whole. At home, Mark had made pasta and lit a few candles, just because. They talked about everything and nothing, the way couples do when they feel safe. Later, as they sat on the couch watching the city lights flicker through the window, he turned to her and asked, "Do you ever miss them?" She didn't have to ask who he meant. Her parents. Emma. She thought for a long time before answering. "I miss the idea of them. The version I used to hope they'd become, but not the people they really were to me." He nodded. "That makes sense." And it did. Because grief isn't always about death. Sometimes, it's about the family you never truly had and the hope you finally let go of. Weeks passed. Spring arrived early that year, with cherry blossoms blooming outside Caitlin's apartment building. One afternoon, she received an unexpected email. It was from her cousin Jason, someone she hadn't spoken to since the wedding drama. The subject line simply read, "Thought you should know." Inside was a screenshot of a Facebook post from Emma. It was long, emotional, and surprisingly honest. "A year ago, I had what should have been the happiest time of my life. But things unraveled. And while I blamed a lot of it on others, I've had time to reflect. I've realized I was complicit in a toxic family dynamic that hurt someone I love, my sister. I don't expect forgiveness. But I needed to say, publicly, that I was wrong. That I'm trying to be better." Caitlin read it twice, her heart thudding in her chest. It wasn't a perfect apology. And it didn't undo what had happened. But it was more than she ever expected. A piece of her wanted to respond. Another piece didn't. She sat with the discomfort, talked it through in therapy, and ultimately decided not to reply, not yet. Maybe one day. Or maybe never. Healing didn't require reconciliation, it only required truth. Still, something about seeing those words, written by the sister who once mocked her while she cried, felt like closure. Not a door slamming shut, but a window finally opened to let the stale air out. That evening, Caitlin returned to her journal. She wrote, "You can grieve what you lost while still choosing not to return to it. You can honor your past while protecting your future. That's what healing really is." By now, the support group had grown. They met in bigger spaces, held workshops, even started a podcast where Caitlin occasionally shared insights and stories. Listeners wrote in from across the country, saying her voice made them feel seen. And Caitlin? She no longer needed revenge to feel powerful. Her peace had become her proof. Her joy was her justice. On the one-year anniversary of her wedding, Mark took her on a weekend getaway. They stayed in a quiet cabin in the woods, far from city noise and family tension. On the second night, they sat by the fire, wrapped in blankets, sipping hot cider. "You know," Mark said, resting his chin on her shoulder. "This time last year, we were dancing under the stars." She smiled. "And I was wondering if it was real. If I could really build a life like this." He kissed her temple. "You didn't just build it, Caitlin. You rebuilt you. That's the real magic." She held his hand tightly, letting the silence stretch. The flames crackled softly, the woods around them peaceful and still. For the first time in years, she didn't feel like she owed anyone an explanation. Not for the boundaries she kept. Not for the life she'd chosen. not for the love she had finally allowed herself to receive. She was no longer the girl whose voice was silenced. She was a woman who had learned to speak clearly, kindly, and with conviction. And that, more than anything, was the kind of story she was proud to keep living. Some betrayals cut so deep, they leave marks you can't see, but you feel them in every step forward. Caitlin's story wasn't just about revenge, it was about rediscovery. About realizing she never had to shrink to fit someone else's comfort, that her voice, her boundaries, and her light mattered, even when those closest to her tried to dim it. In the end, the most powerful thing she did wasn't crafting the perfect revenge. It was choosing peace over chaos, growth over bitterness, and freedom over obligation. She didn't just walk away, she walked towards something better. Toward a life where love is safe. Where family is chosen, not forced. Where healing doesn't require approval, only truth. And maybe that's what so many of us are searching for. Not a dramatic confrontation or the perfect clapback, but the quiet confidence to say, I deserve better than this. And then take the steps, one by one, to build that better. So if you've ever felt like the black sheep, the scapegoat, the one expected to stay silent, know this. You are not alone. Your story isn't over. And you have more power than you think. If this story touched you, share your thoughts in the comments. Maybe you've been through something similar. Maybe you're just now finding the courage to take that first step. Either way, we'd love to hear from you. And if you'd like more stories like this raw, real, and filled with hope, be sure to like this video and subscribe. You never know whose story might help you find your voice. Thank you for spending this time with us. And remember, real family lifts you up. They don't cut you down.